The Moon Bog by H.P. Lovecraft. Somewhere, to what remote and fearsome region I know not, Dennis Barry has gone. I was with him the last night he lived among men, and heard his screams when the thing came to him. But all the peasants and police in County Meath could never find him, or the others, though they searched long and far, and now I shudder when I hear the frogs piping in swamps, or see the moon in lonely places. I had known Dennis Barry well in America, where he had grown rich, and had congratulated him when he bought back the old castle by the bog at sleepy Kildare. It was from Kildare that his father had come, and it was there that he wished to enjoy his wealth among ancestral scenes. Men of his blood had once ruled over Kildare, and built and dwelt in the castle, but those days were very remote, so that for generations the castle had been empty and decaying. After he went to Ireland, Barry wrote me often, and told me how under his care the grey castle was rising tower by tower to its ancient splendour, how the ivy was climbing slowly over the restored walls as it had climbed so many centuries ago, how the peasants blessed him for bringing back the old days with his gold from over the sea. But in time there came troubles, and the peasants ceased to bless him, and fled away instead as from a doom. And then he sent a letter and asked me to visit him, for he was lonely in the castle, with no one to speak to save the new servants and labourers he had brought from the north. The bog was the cause of all these troubles. As Barry told me the night I came to the castle, I had reached Kildare in the summer sunset, as the gold of the sky lighted the green of the hills and groves and the blue of the bog, where on a far islet a strange old ruin glistened spectrally. That sunset was very beautiful, but the peasants at Ballydoe had warned me against it, and said that Kildare had become accursed, so that I almost shuddered to see the high turrets of the castle gilded with fire. Barry's motor had met me at Ballyloe station, for Kildare is off the railway. The villagers had shunned the car and driver from the north, but had whispered to me with pale faces when they saw I was going to Kildare, and that night, after our reunion, Barry told me why. The peasants had gone from Kildare because Dennis Barry was to drain the great bog. For all his love of Ireland, America had not left him untouched, and he hated the beautiful wasted space where peat might be cut and land opened up. The legends and superstitions of Kildare did not move him, and he laughed when the peasants first refused to help, and then cursed him and went away to Ballyloe with their few belongings as they saw his determination. In their place he sent for labourers from the north, and when the servants left he replaced them likewise. But it was lonely among strangers, so Barry had asked me to come. When I heard the fears which had driven the people from Kildare, I laughed as loudly as my friend had laughed, for these fears were of the vaguest, wildest, most absurd character. They had to do with some preposterous legend of the bog, and a grim guardian spirit that dwelt in the strange old ruin and the far islet I had seen in sunset. There were tales of dancing lights in the dark of the moon, and of chill winds that night was warm, of wraiths in white hovering over the waters, and of imagined city of stone deep down below the swampy surface. But foremost among the weird fancies, and alone in its absolute unanimity, with that of the curse awaiting him who should dare touch or drain the vast reddish morass. There were secrets, said the peasants, which must not be uncovered, secrets that had lain hidden since the plague came to the children of the Partholin, in the fabulous years beyond history. In the Book of Invaders it is told that those sons of the Greeks were all buried at Talate, but of old men in Kildare said that one city was overlooked, saved by its patron moon goddess, so that only the wooded hills buried it when the men of Nemed swept down from Scythia in their 30 ships. Such were the idle tales which had made the villagers leave Kildare, and when I heard them I did not wonder that Dennis Barry had refused to listen. He had, however, a great interest in antiquities, and proposed to explore the bog thoroughly when it was drained. The white ruins on the islet he had often visited, but through their age was plainly great, their contour very little like that of most ruins of Ireland. They were too dilapidated to tell the days of their glory. Now the work of drainage was ready to begin, and the labourers from the north were soon to strip the forbidden bog of its green moss and red heather, and kill the tiny shell-paved streamlets and quiet blue pools fringed with rushes. After Barry had told me these things I was very drowsy, for the travels of the day had been weary, and my host had talked late into the night. A manservant showed me to my room, which was in a remote tower overlooking the village, and there at the plain edge of the bog, and the bog itself, so that I could see from my windows in the moonlight the silent roofs from which the peasants had fled, and which now sheltered the labourers from the north, and, too, the parish church with its antique spire. And far out across the brooding bog the remote old ruin on the islet gleaming white and spectral. Just as I dropped to sleep I fancied I heard faint sounds from the distance, sounds that were wild and half musical, and stirred me with weird excitement which coloured my dreams. But when I awaked the next morning I felt it had all been a dream, for my visions were more wonderful than any sound of wild pipes in the night. Influenced by legends that Barry had related, my mind had in slumber hovered around a stately city in a green valley, where marble streets and statues, villas and temples, carvings and inscriptions, all spoke in certain tones the glory that was Greece. When I told this dream to Barry, we both laughed. I laughed the louder because he was perplexed about his labourers from the north. For the sixth time they had overslept, waking slowly and dazedly and acting as if they had not rested, although they were known to have gone early to bed the night before. That morning and afternoon I wandered alone through the sun-gilded village and talked now and then with the idle labourers, for Barry was busy with the final plans for beginning his works of drainage. The labourers were not as happy as they might have been, for most of them seemed uneasy over some dream which they had had, yet they tried in vain to remember. I told them of my dream, but they were not interested till I spoke of the weird sounds I thought I had heard. They, too, looked oddly at me and said they seemed to have remembered weird sounds, too. In the evening Barry dined with me and announced that he would begin the drainage in 2 days. I was glad, for although I disliked to see the moss and heather and little streams and lakes depart, I had a growing wish to discern the ancient secrets that deep matted peat might hide. And that night my dreams of piping flutes and marble peristyles came to a sudden and disquieting end, for upon the city in the valley I saw a pestilence descend, and then a frightful avalanche of wooded slopes that covered the dead bodies in the streets, and left unburied only the temple of Artemis on the high peak, where the aged moon priestess Clais lay cold and silent with a crown of ivory on her silver head. I have said that I awaked suddenly and in alarm. For some time I could not tell whether I was waking or sleeping, for the sound of flutes still rang shrilly in my ears. But when I saw on the floor the icy moonbeams and the outlines of a latticed Gothic window, I decided I must be awake, and in the castle of Kildare. I then heard a clock from some remote landing below strike the hour of 2, and I knew I was awake. Yet still there seemed that monstrous piping from afar, wild, weird airs that made me think of some dance of fauns on distant Manlius. I would not let me sleep, and in impatience I sprang up and paced the floor. Only by chance did I go to the north window and look out upon the silent village and the plain at the edge of the bog. I had no wish to gaze abroad, for I wanted to sleep, but the flutes tormented me, and I had to do or see something. How could I have suspected the thing was to behold? There, in the moonlight that flooded the spacious plain, was a spectacle which no mortal have seen it could ever forget. To the sound of reedy pipes that echoed over the bog, there glided silently and eerily a mixed throng of swaying figures, reeling through such a revel as the Sicilians may have danced to Demeter in the old days under the harvest moon beside the Cyane. In the white plain, the golden moonlight, the shadowy moving forms, and above all the shrill monotonous piping, produced an effect which almost paralyzed me. Yet I noted amidst my fear that half of these tireless mechanical dancers were the labourers whom I had thought asleep, whilst the other half were in strange airy beings in white, half indeterminate in nature, but suggesting pale, wistful naiads from the haunted fountains of the bog.